It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung
by immigrants as they struck out to the shores, pioneers who pushed westward.
The title of our episode, Labor Day 2012, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Labor Day in the U.S. is celebrated not in concurrence with International Workers' Day, which is May 1st, but as a substitute for it. But nonetheless, working people across these 50 continuous states are celebrating their day. It is a national holiday. And what we have done is look at the campaign 2020 and took four of the presidential candidates. Bernie Sanders, the junior senator from Vermont. Elizabeth Warren, the junior senator from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, El Paso, Texas. And finally, senior senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar. Bernie Sanders is speaking at the Minnesota State Fair. Elizabeth Warren is speaking to a town meeting in Indiana. Beto O'Rourke is speaking to the AFL-CIO in Iowa, and also Amy Klobuchar. They're talking about the part that unions play in the American society, in the American body politic. We at WBRN always are known for bringing some statistical information to the people. We'll look at what happened in Michigan as a bellwether. Michigan, a very important state, one of the states pointed out by some analysts as crucial, those being Michigan, Wisconsin, in the upper Midwest, the state of Pennsylvania. Also, let me see, I didn't leave anyone out here. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. Hey, those three. There were four, but anyway, we'll get to three there. Very important what happened in Wisconsin under Boss Walker when he was the governor there and demolished the union membership. That does matter because unions play an integral part in the American electoral system in getting out the vote, and also in terms of financing. We had the Janus ruling that union funds cannot be used for political purposes unless the union member so specifies. And right-to-work efforts in various other states. Michigan, though, is ground zero. That is the home of the United Auto Workers Union. Let's get to some statistics here. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics out of Chicago. Union membership in Michigan 2018. Union membership accounted for 14.5% of wages and salary workers in Michigan, compared with 15.6% in 2012. Union membership rates in the state in a series of PACs in 1989, when the average was 26%. The state's lowest membership rate was 14%. Now, 14.4%. This was in 2016. Nationwide, union membership accounts for 10.5% of employed wage salary workers in 2018, down from 10.7% in 2017, since comparable state data available in 1989. Union membership rates in Michigan has been above the national average. Michigan has 625,000 union members in 2018. In addition to those members, another 38,000 wage and salary workers in Michigan were represented by unions on their major job or covered by employees associations or contracts while not being union members themselves. Nationwide, 14.7 million wage and salary workers were union members in 2018. 1.6 million wage and salary workers were not affiliated with unions but had jobs covered by union contracts. So this gives a little bit of percentage there of union workers in various occupations here. In 2018, 29 states, District of Columbia, had union membership below that of the U.S. average of 10.5, while 20 states had rates above it. One state had the same rate, union membership below 5% in 2018, North Carolina. Incidentally, that one state we left out was Florida. North Carolina and South Carolina have the lowest rates, 2.7%. There are auto plants, incidentally, in those states. The lowest rates were in Utah. The next lowest rate, 4.1%. And Texas and Virginia. Texas, very, very large state, and Virginia at 4.3% each. Two states have union membership over 20%. That is Hawaii and New York. Hawaii has 23.1%, and New York 22.3%. The largest number of union members live in California, 2.4 million. In New York, 1.9 million. Over half of the 14 million union members in the U.S. live in 7 states. California, 2.4 million. New York, 1.9. Illinois, 0.8 million. Pennsylvania, another important state we just talked about, that some analysts think the 2020 election will be decided there. 0.7 million workers there. And Michigan, Ohio, and Washington, 0.10 million each. Those states account for only about 1/3 of wage and salary workers nationally. And this was how it was done. We won't go into that, but these are some very important figures that we need to keep in mind and cognizant of, and those numbers need to be improved. Now we have the Service Workers International Union, who is organizing all types of workers. The Fight for 15, very, very important there, that has been going on continuously as we look at that. Now let me just go back a bit here and see what we are getting here. We're going to the Washington Post. Now, this is very important here, the election. This is from the Washington Post, and we came with the statistics, but nonetheless, big picture of Boss Walker here. The headline here, the GOP attacks on American unions could cost Democrats the 2020 election. Labor has less to spend on campaign message because of laws in key states let workers skip the fees. It's by Steve Greenhouse on the 28th of August. The 2020 Democratic presidential candidates are falling all over themselves to win support from unions, leaders, and members on the road. I am a union man, period. That's from Joe Biden. I stand with farm workers who are fighting for stronger wage comparative and comprehensive benefits, dignity on the job. That's Elizabeth Warren. Bernie Sanders proposed a double union membership. Kamala Harris wants teachers to get a $13,500 raise. There's a lot of love, considering Democrats in general have done little to save union losses in the past few decades. The percentage of workers in unions is at its lowest point in more than a century. That's 100 years, down from a 10.5% from a peak of 35%. That was in 1954. That was even on the I Like Ike. Well, different economy there. Labor remains a traditional Democratic constituency, even though Hillary Clinton won union votes by just 8 percentage points. Now, this is a very important number here. 8 percentage points over DJ Trump. The narrowest margin for Democrats since 1984. That was a matchup between Ronald Reagan. Democrats want that vote back, and particularly needed in free states that flipped from blue to red in 2016. Now we're talking about blue-collar support in the state of Pennsylvania, Michigan, the home of the UAW, and Wisconsin could be critical to winning the presidency, no doubt about that. Those states have deeply over the past 10 years. Republican lawmakers have done their utmost best to hasten the decline. On the Boss Walker's legislation in 2011 to gut public workers' unions, there's been a far greater effort on union roles than many people realize. Far greater effect, largely because of that anti-union law. Union membership in Wisconsin has fallen at a faster rate over the past decade than other states, plunging by 44%, or 177,000 workers since 2008. Job losses from the Depression also fueled the decline. So did anti-union fee directives, often called right-to-work laws, passed by Walker's Republicans there. Such provision let workers at unionized workplaces decline to pay any dues or fees at the union for bargaining for them. This encouraged some workers to quit the union as dues. Walker insisted at the time that he wanted to hobble government workers' unions for just one reason: to hold down the costs on wages, health care, and pensions. And one of Walker's top cronies, Scott Fitzgerald, let slip a partisan moment behind the law. If we win this battle, the money is not there for other aspects of the union. President Obama is going to have much more difficult time getting elected in 2012, winning the state of Wisconsin. He won Wisconsin, but DJ Trump nearly won it in 2016. There are fewer 177,000 fewer union workers in the state of Wisconsin, and DJ Trump won the state by 22,740 votes. Had those union workers not left the union, their dues had helped fund a more pro-Clinton campaign and anti-Trump message of his, Clinton might have won that. Well, Clinton didn't campaign there. The story is similar in Michigan. Between 2008 and 2018, union memberships dropped 19%, or 146,000 workers, to 625,000. Trump won Michigan by 10,704 votes. Declining membership is largely attributed to the automotive industry's hard times during the Depression and the right-to-work laws passed in the state of Michigan, enacted in 2013. Study found as a result of the law, Michigan's largest union reduced political spending by $26 million, or 57%. Henry Faber, he's labor economist at Princeton, found that right-to-work laws, by allowing non-union dues paying free riders, substantially shrunk the unions. And Elwood, former dean, David Elwood of Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and Glenn Fine, a former Justice Department official, found in another study that right-to-work laws, absent other factors, cause 5 or 10% drop in union membership. Ronald Zollo, director of the Center for Labor and Community Studies at the University of Michigan, this is at Dearborn, found that the share of blue-collar workers saying that they have been contacted and get out the vote efforts fell by 11% after the right-to-work laws were enacted. Comparative effect on white-collar workers. 28 study by Fernandez. Hold on a minute here. Fingerbaum and in Boston University, Alexander Fernandez at Columbia University, and Vanessa Williamson at the Brookings Institute concluded that all right-to-work laws caused that any right-to-work laws caused Democratic voters' share to drop by 3.5%. That in states that passed the law, that was far more than Trump's winning margin of 0.2% in Michigan and 0.8% in Wisconsin. Story is somewhat different in Pennsylvania because Republicans there haven't been able to push through these anti-union fees, but still the Great Depression, as they call it recession, we call it depression. The union lost 182,000 members since 2008, falling by 21% to 665,000. Trump won Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes effectively. Many analysts attribute Clinton's loss to those three supported blue wall states, to her failure connecting well with blue-collar workers, and to Trump wooing them with impossible promises to bring back all the jobs, stop the flood of factory closings. That has not happened. Republican lawmakers have pushed a myriad of ways to further hobble unions through legislation and through court cases. Janus versus Acts Council 31, in which the Supreme Court ruled last year that teachers, police officers, and other public workers can't be required to pay any dues or fees to unions that bargain for them. Old Grover Norquist is at the center of this. Any tax crusade, the results of Boston Walker's anti-union law known as Act 10, 135,000 workers in Wisconsin have stopped paying union dues. He said this has cut union revenue by $135 million a year, noting that other Republican governors hope to enact similar legislation. Iowa, for instance, passed Wisconsin-like legislation in 2017. Norquist predicted if Act 10 is enacted in a dozen more states, the modern Democratic Party will cease to be a competitive power in American politics. The New York Times columnist Edsel noted in 2004 how concerned Republicans were about unions and how unconcerned many Democrats were. A paradox of American politics, he wrote, is that Republicans take organized labor more seriously than Democrats do. The right sees unions as a mainstay of the left, a critical source of cash, campaign power, and votes. If Republicans and conservatives place a top priority on emasculating labor unions, what is the Democratic Party doing to protect their core constituency? Not much. This article is very, very critical of the Democratic Party. That's changing this election cycle. I've written about labor unions' political campaigns for more than 2 decades. Never have I seen much talk amongst Democrats about the importance of unions and helping them expand. I've seen this year amongst the candidates. They saw how their party hopes were dashed to 16. Clinton lost, of course, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, key states. Longtime labor stronghold, just as Republicans have seen that pulling down labor has been important to their political success. Democrats finally are recognizing and building up unions, and union membership could be vital to their success in 2020, and I would say 2024 and beyond. But other things are happening out there. The progressive movement is, in fact, becoming increasingly important and growing because of candidates like Bernie Sanders, Liz Warren, Beto O'Rourke, and Amy Klobuchar. Now, there are others out there, but they're not as deeply entrenched, or we'll say embedded in the trade union movement as those four. Amy comes from a union family. Her grandfather was an iron ore miner. Her father, a member of the newspaper guild. And her mother, a member of the school teachers union, her late mother. And then we have Bernie Sanders, a man who has been closely aligned with the trade union movement his entire political career. When he was mayor of Burlington, Vermont, and when he was in the House of Representatives, had a very long track record there. And Elizabeth Warren, with many, many policies, programs. She explains this. Listen to her very carefully, because she talks about what's going on. Bernie talks about at the Minnesota State Fair, Medicare for All, how it would affect workers, how it would affect healthcare organizations. There's some very large ones in Minnesota, like United Healthcare, and how it would affect medical centers like the Mayo Clinic. There would be places there that would take tuitions, and expanding Medicare for all, and Medicare with vision and with hearing aids and dental and those sort of things. Along the line of that 4-year program there, Elizabeth Warren talked about a bill that she co-sponsored with some Republicans, and that will come later this year, where one can buy hearing aids over the counter, and that will cut down on the expense of hearing aids going from costing thousands of dollars to a lot less there. And of course, obviously, over-the-counter means on the internet, Amazon, etc. That market will open up and should have opened up a long time ago. You can buy glasses basically where your prescription is. That is over-the-counter. Once you get a prescription, you can do that or at any optometrist. So the costs went down, cost of frames that went up. We've attacked that particular issue. So on we go to Bernie Sanders in Minnesota, Elizabeth Warren in Indiana, and Beto O'Rourke and Amy Klobuchar in Iowa at the trade unions AFL-CIO conventions there in the state of Iowa. Happy Labor Day to all out there from WBRN Radio, Boston Red Network. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Good day. Take us out of here, Sarah Guffrey.
Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont at the Minnesota State Fair. Great turnout here, Senator, today. So thanks for taking the time to do this with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for hosting this.
Yes. I'd love to start right in, if we could, with what I think is a very basic but important question. And that is, why are you running for president again? What are you doing this for? Tell us. Why?
Well, let me begin by thanking...
All right, let the senator answer. Let the senator answer, please.
Well, first of all, let me begin by thanking the people of Minnesota for the really strong support we had in the last campaign. Thank you, Minnesota. But in this campaign, we're not going to take anything for granted. We're going to be back here in Minnesota. We're going to work as hard as we can to once again win this very important state. But let me answer Tom's question. And Tom, there are two fundamental reasons why, after a lot of thought, Jane and I decided to do this again. Number one, it is absolutely imperative for the future of this country that we defeat the most dangerous president in American history. This country cannot continue to have a president who is a pathological liar, who conducts public policy via tweets, who is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, and a xenophobe, and a religious bigot. We are a great nation, and what every president before Trump has understood is that when you are president, you bring people together, black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American. We are all Americans. You don't act as Trump is doing, trying to divide us up. That is not what a president does. Second of all, Tom, it is not just about defeating Trump. This country today faces enormous problems. For the last 45, 50 years, there has been a war against the working families of this country. And almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. We need an economy. We need a government that represents all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. We need to join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee health care to all people as a human right. And I am proud to be leading the effort to make sure that we pass a Medicare for all single-payer program. I'm running for president because the future of this country rests with our young people. I do not want to see tens of millions of young people buried on the mountains of student debt, which is why we're going to cancel all student debt in this country, and why we are going to make public colleges and universities tuition-free.
All right.
And Tom, lastly, I'm running for president because we have got to address the obscenity at the level of income and wealth inequality that exists in America. And as president, let me tell the 1% and let me tell profitable large corporations, they will begin to start paying their fair share of taxes.
Now, Senator, you bring up a number of topics there that I want to get to, a number of issues. But first, I want to talk about Medicare for All specifically. Now, here in Minnesota, thousands of people are employed in the health insurance field and allied medical fields. We have a medical tech, robust medical tech industry here. These are high-skilled, good-quality jobs. What would happen to them, especially at a large corporation and employer in Minnesota like United Health Group? Health Partners, what would happen to them and the companies that provide them if Medicare for All is put in place?
Let me answer the question, Tom, in this way. I'm going to answer it in detail. What we have got to recognize are a couple of facts. Health care is a human right, not a privilege. And what we have got to recognize, Tom, is we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right. Second thing we have got to understand is that in this dysfunctional system, we are now spending twice as much per as to the people of any other industrialized country. The function of health care must not be simply to provide $100 billion in profits to the insurance companies and the drug companies. But function of health care...
But the workers here in Minnesota...
I'm going to get to it, Tom. I really will. All right? But the function of health care should also not be to force Americans to pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. The function of health care should not be, and this is really quite unbelievable. Last year, 500,000 Americans went bankrupt because they suffered a serious illness and could not afford to pay their medical bills. That is insane. All right? 30,000 people died last year because they did not get to the doctor on time. 87 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured. That is what we're dealing right now. Now, when we move to a Medicare for all, will there be dislocation? But we provide a period of time to make sure that all workers who might see their jobs go because they're involved in billing and other areas will get jobs in a new and growing healthcare system, which in fact will provide more jobs than the current system because we're going to cover all of our people.
Senator, how will that work? Will the insurance companies under Medicare for All be, in effect, put out of business and made illegal?
Medicare today is the most popular health insurance program in this country. Okay? The function of a private health insurance company is what, folks? What's its function? It's to make money. That is its function. I happen to believe that the function of a rational and sane healthcare system is to provide quality care to all, not to make $100 billion in profits for the industry. So what we will do, Tom, this is the plan, and it really is not complicated. What right now, the first thing we will do in the first year is to expand Medicare to cover what it does not cover now, which is dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses. And in that first year, we will lower the age of eligibility, which is now 65, down to 55. In the next year, we go to 45, then to 35, and then we cover every man, woman, and child in this country. So We are going to answer the question of why we spend so much more than other countries, why so many of our people are uninsured or underinsured, why so many people are actually dying in America today because they cannot afford the prescription drugs or the health care that they need. So a Medicare for All system will give all of our people freedom of choice regarding the doctor you want to go to, freedom of choice regarding the hospital you want to go to, and like our brothers and sisters in Canada, there will be no deductibles, no premiums, no copayment, no out-of-pocket expenses. And when you eliminate all, the overwhelming majority of the American people will be paying less under a Medicare for All system than they do today under our dysfunctional system.
Now, I assume in formulating this that you have had conversations with some of the larger healthcare providers. And I'm thinking here in our region, Mayo Clinic. And Mayo Clinic has been in the news over the last few years of preferring private insured patients to patients with Medicare because of the reimbursement is higher. And so how would that work for, again, a huge employer and a huge economic driver, Mayo Clinic?
There will be global budgeting for hospitals. Look, right now, when you have a private insurance motivated system where the function of the healthcare system is to make money, bad things happen. What we do, as the Canadians will do, is we provide global budgeting to great hospitals, not only like the Mayo Clinic, but to small rural hospitals all over this country.
Right.
Because when the function of the system is not to make huge profits, but to provide health care to all,
I think every one of the things we talk about, we call them policy, we call them budgets, they're really about our values. And they're a statement of what kind of a country we want to be and what kind of a people we want to be. And I wish we could do more of that in our big national conversation.
So we're going to go horse. If one of you had a horse race question, I hope you're reconsidering.
That's right.
So right before we go to the
That's
audience. Right. All right, you, sir, give me your name and tell me what your question is. You can stand up for me.
Yep. My name is Austin, and my question is...
Hi, Austin.
How you doing today? My question is, climate change is real, and we got to get going on it. GM here in Fort Wayne is one of our largest employers that make trucks. How do we make sure that that factory is not negatively impacted with your policies?
Oh, good question. Good question.
Great question.
So here's how we have to think of this. We got to know what the goal is. This is what the Green New Deal is all about. It tells us two things. It tells us that this is an emergency, and it tells us where we got to head. And it's a lot like, for me, what it was like for landing on the moon, right? John F. Kennedy set the goal. He said, I want to be on the moon. He set a time that he wanted to do it. People looked left, looked right, and said, gee, I don't know how we land on the moon. But what did we do? We invested in science. We innovated like crazy, and we counted on American workers. We do those three things right here in America. We can not only clean up our country and clean up our planet, we can actually build a manufacturing future for the United States of America, and that's good jobs right
there. Just to follow up on that, right? It's a great question, right? Because look, if they're making big trucks that get 14 miles a gallon, right? Like that factory's either going to have to shut down or be remade. And there's industries like oil extraction and natural gas there's no way to make them green, right? I mean, there's going to be some folks that lose jobs in those industries.
Look, what there's going to be is a lot of change, but that's how America's always flourished. We didn't make ourselves into a country that said, whoop, this works, we're stopping right here. We have always been a country that has innovated, that has changed. You know what really troubles me right now is the way this administration keeps trying to deny science across the board. Listen, that's not going to work. That's why my plan starts by increasing by tenfold the amount of money that we put in to scientific research and R&D. That's how we start building a future. And then we innovate around that. But here's the hook in it that makes it different from where it was in the past. We don't just say to giant corporations, you know, like we did to Apple. You all, taxpayers, you paid for the basic technology to develop that science, that technology that led to those fancy phones. And then where did Apple go build them? In China. So what this plan says is American taxpayers will make the investment because we believe in building a future. But then you want to harvest that investment. You want to make big bucks on it. Great. It's a $23 trillion market out there. We want you to do it. But you're going to do it by building those plants and having those jobs right here in the United States of America.
No, you can say that. Can you tell me your name and your question?
Hi, Senator. My name is Courtney Tritch.
Hi, Courtney.
Hello. When I ran for U.S. Congress in 2018...
Yay!
Thank you. Everyone wanted to know, rightly so, how I would work across the aisle, and that's so important. But what I want to know is, what is the one issue or piece of legislation that you feel so strongly about you would not compromise on it?
Oh, so let me put it this way. I believe in working across the aisle when that lets us get things done. And can I do a really short version of this? 40 million Americans have hearing loss, but fewer than 1 in 6 actually gets a hearing aid. And the reason is because they cost $1 bazillion. And most people need 2, and they're not covered by insurance, and they're not covered by Medicaid. Okay, so what do? They do without. Why are they so expensive? And the answer is one more market that doesn't work. That is, a handful of manufacturers have controlled that market and driven up prices. So I had an idea and a plan to say what we're going to do is let anybody who wants to manufacture hearing aids, certain safety standards, sell them across the counter in drugstores. Think about it. You can buy glasses. You can go pay for more, or you can buy glasses in a drugstore, and a lot of people get help. I check this out with doctors and scientists. They all say that would work great, and it would drive the price down from thousands of dollars to hundreds of dollars. So I had this idea, and you know what I did? First person I called is a Republican. I explained the deal to him, and he said, "What?" And I explained it again. And he said, "That's a fine idea. Sign me up." And I called another Republican. He said, "Sign me up." Called another Republican. He said, "Sign me up." We did this under the radar screen. Now, at one point, the NRA came out in opposition. I kid you not.
It's true.
But the point is, we got it through, and next year, people are going to be able to buy hearing aids over the counter across the aisle. It's huge, too. Now, can I finish Courtney's question, though?
Yep.
I do want to say on this, though, Courtney, and I was glad to do that. We made some changes in the bill, but we're talking about things like health care coverage. I'm not going to compromise when people say I want to take away health care coverage from 30 million people. Does that take a while? We'll just take it away from 15 million, and that's going to be okay. Health care is a basic human right. We fight for basic human rights. So I mean, all the way. Thank you, Courtney.
So, Senator, this is, I want to introduce you. This is TJ Bray. He worked the Carrier plant, and there was coverage of him on NBC asking Donald Trump to save the jobs at Carrier. That was what prompted Donald Trump to tweet about it and come down. You're a Trump voter. I think you're still inclined.
No, I didn't vote for Trump.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
No.
What is this? What would you like to ask the Senator?
Well, I am
TJ.
I'm from Indianapolis. I worked at Carrier. I still do. I'm a 17-year employee. Thankfully, my job was saved. I'm also with the United Steelworkers Union, Local 1999.
Go Steelworkers.
So my question to you is, I really don't know much of your history with labor and organized labor. So what can we expect to see your support of organized labor and how we can get that brought back up in this country?
Okay. So let me do this two ways. The first is, I told you about all 3 of my brothers, military. First one was career. Second one came back and worked construction. And he got a good union job. a good union job that let him support a family and put 3 kids through school. And he has a pension today because he had a good union job. We want to have good jobs in America, then we need stronger unions. Is I'll just do it just a little bit on the policy side, and that is to say we got a real problem in this country, and that's a handful of giant corporations that have so much power, they just roll wherever they want to roll. They roll over their employees, they roll over their customers, they roll over their communities. We need structural change, and the way we get structural change is we need more power back in the hands of employees. That means make it easier to join a union and give unions more power when they're in negotiations. Unions built America's middle class. Unions will rebuild America's middle class.
Thank you so much, DJ. There's a question over here I want to get to on something that we cover on the show sometimes. Say your name.
Hi,
and your
Senator.
question.
My name's Erin.
Hi, Erin.
How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. My question for you is, do you believe still that impeachment is the right path forward, and why or why not?
Yes, I do. Understand this, Erin. I didn't decide to run for president so that I could get into a big debate over impeachment. I decided to run because I was going to beat that guy, right? Straight up. But the deal is, the Mueller report came out, and the afternoon it came out, I sat down and started reading it. And I read it all afternoon, and I read it all night, and I read it into the next morning, all 448 pages. I got to the end, and there were 3 things that are just, man, there's no avoiding them. Part 1, a hostile foreign government attacked our 2016 elections for the purpose of getting Donald Trump elected. Part 2, then candidate Donald Trump welcomed that help. And Part 3, when the federal government tried to investigate Part 1 and Part 2, Donald Trump, as president, delayed, deflected, moved, fired, and did everything he could to obstruct justice. If he were any other person in the United States, based on what's documented in that report, he would be carried out in handcuffs. Now, took an oath of office, not to Donald Trump, not to any president. I took an oath of office to the Constitution of the United States of America. And that Constitution says no one is above the law, including the President of the United States. I get that this is politically tough. I get it. But some things are bigger than politics. And this matters for our democracy, not just now, but under the next president and the next president and the next president. We have a constitutional responsibility here, and that's to start those impeachment proceedings.
Let me ask you.
I have a chance to introduce myself to those of you I have not met, to see those of you who I have met before again, and to share with you a little bit of my perspective on what I see as some of the challenges and the opportunities in this country. And I bring to you our greetings and our gratitude from El Paso, Texas. Many of you reached out after the shooting on August 3rd to check in on our community, to send your encouragement and your love, your thoughts and your prayers. I was just talking to Paula backstage, who's helping to organize today's event. And she told me that her son and daughter-in-law live in El Paso, Texas, and as soon as she heard about the shooting, she called them to make sure that they were okay. And thank God that they were. But we talked about some of the stories of those who were not okay, who did not make it out. The mom who was being dropped off by her son and her husband just to go into that Walmart and grab some groceries and never came out again. The moms and dads who coached a girls' soccer team and were selling lemonade and horchata to try and raise money to send that team to Tucson for a tournament. And those parents doing what you would do in the same situation, literally putting their bodies and their lives in between that shooter and their kids, Their kids for whom they would sacrifice everything, including their lives, and unfortunately some of those parents had to do that. And I think about that shooting, that act of terror, and I feel compelled to draw the connections and understand the consequences of our politics in this country today and the decisions that we've made consciously or unconsciously. To allow someone to purchase an AK-47, a weapon of war designed to kill people as effectively and as efficiently as possible. To inspire him with fear and hatred and racism of people who do not look like the majority in this country. To warn of invasions and infestations, as the president has, of immigrants coming to this country. To call human beings killers and animals, to cage kids, to lose the lives of 7 children in our custody and care at the U.S.-Mexico border, to dehumanize people and to create such a paranoia and anxiety about those who are coming to this country seeking a better life. To know that that fueled that killer 600 miles from Allen, Texas to El Paso, Texas, is important for all of us to know if we are going to not accept it simply as an act of evil or a force of nature or something that we cannot prevent in our own lives, because we are all connected in a very violent and sometimes very hateful country. And if we do not acknowledge this, if we do not work to change it, sooner or later it will find every single one of us, as it has found our community. But just as important as drawing those connections might be, so is connecting one another in this great country, ensuring that our differences are not disqualifying and are not seen as dangerous. I just left Marshalltown, absolutely inspired by that community of immigrants who understand that our differences not only do not disqualify us, but make us stronger and safer and more secure. And that was not coming from any politician or any Democrat or any Republican. That was coming from the chief of police in Marshalltown. A message that resonates in El Paso, Texas, one of the safest cities in America, not despite, but because it's a city of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. I have found that when it comes to labor and advocating for the working woman and the working man in this country, when we make those connections explicit, that support of unions is great not just for members of unions, but is great for this entire country, then there is no stopping us. I spent 6 years on the Veterans Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives. And when I saw AFGE come in and make the case not for members of AFGE, but talking about how official time allows them to work on the comorbidities of substance abuse and mental health problems in a country that loses more than 22 veterans a day, every single day, by their own hand. AFGE was making the case that AFGE is good for the veterans, for those who put their lives on the line for this country, willing to sacrifice them, and through AFGE, we are going to save them. In El Paso, Texas, we received an embarrassment of riches in federal investment through one of the base realignment and closure decisions, BRAC processes, that benefited Fort Bliss and El Paso more than any other military installation in the country. $6 billion invested in our community, which was wonderful on the one hand, but because we live in a right-to-work state, because we had not elevated labor unions, because we didn't have enough apprenticeships in El Paso for the electricians and the steel workers and the plumbers and the carpenters that we needed for that work, we literally imported all of the labor from outside of El Paso to work high value, high skill, high wage jobs in our community. That made the case to me that organized labor, that these apprenticeships, that this ability to learn a trade or a skill without a cost to you in debt and the ability to retrain for the rest of your life is good not just for the members of IBEW or the steel workers. It was great for our community if we had availed ourselves of the opportunity. Taken advantage of that, we would have received that money and it would have stayed in our community. Traveling Iowa, listening to independents and Democrats and Republicans alike, they are concerned about a teacher shortage in this state. That, again, did not just happen in a vacuum, was a conscious decision of the state legislature here that removed the collective bargaining rights of public employees, including public educators in Iowa. And so the taxpayers here, many of you among them, have paid to train and raise teachers who are leaving this state for Minnesota, which is receiving a bumper crop of kindergarten teachers and physics teachers and people who could have made this community even better if their labor and their value was recognized in the laws that we pass. And that is something felt by everyone, regardless of political division, regardless of geography, regardless of any difference. So supporting those teacher unions, supporting those public workers, supporting AFSCME, that's good not just for the members of those unions. That's good not just for the unions. That's good for this state, for the kids in the classroom who deserve a world-class education. Another lesson I've learned from this moment in this country and what has happened in El Paso, it is that when we, as elected officials, people in positions of public trust, fail to make progress on health care so that it's a human right and not a function of privilege or luck or circumstance, or a living wage so you don't have to work a second or a third job just to make ends meet, or the dignity of being able to take time off from work to take care of yourself or a loved one or someone in your family, then we leave fertile ground to those demagogues who will channel our frustration and our rage and our anger, all of which is justified at the dysfunction of our government. And they will focus it on immigrants, on the most vulnerable, on those who do not have a defender. And I saw those people this week in Mississippi, the largest single state workplace raid in the history of the United States of America. Almost 700 people picked up, taken from, arrested in the very workplaces where day and night they labor for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. These polleros, these immigrants from Guatemala mainly, who came here for the privilege of working in chicken processing plants so that this country could feed itself for $8 an hour, $10 an hour. If you've been working for 18 years, you've worked yourself up to $12 an hour. Now detained, locked behind bars, separated from their families. We've got to be connected to them. This divide and conquer strategy used by the president and others to keep us apart and divided and polarized in this country can only be overcome when we consciously make the connections with one another. So as we stand here today, for the working woman and the working man in this country, let us not forget those who recently came to this country, who need our help now more than ever. Let's elevate every single person who wants to put in an honest day's or an honest night's work and bring this deeply divided country together. It is the only way that we will defeat Donald Trump. It is the only way that we will reunite as Americans, and it is the only way that we will meet the most ambitious agenda, the greatest set of challenges that this country has ever faced. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having me out here today. It is a huge honor to be with you, and I'm grateful for your advocacy and your work. Les agradezco. Gracias. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you to all your leadership. Have you heard enough speeches? No, of course not. You know what we say in the Senate, everything's been said, but I haven't said it. It is wonderful to be here with all of you today. I want to first of all thank you for your hard work in the 2018 election, where you turned the House of Representatives back into the People's House by helping us to elect Abby and Cindy. Thank you for that. That was incredible work. And we had a pretty good year in Minnesota, where I headed up the ticket and won in every single red congressional district. But next door, it was more of an amazing thing. And when people ask me, can Democrats win in the Midwest? Can we win in hard districts? I always give them 4 words: former Governor Scott Walker. All right? We can win in the Midwest. So my story is a Midwest story, and my story is a union story. My grandpa was an iron ore miner. He worked 1,500 feet underground his whole life. He was first a teamster when his parents were sick. He had to drop out of school when he was in middle school, went to work pulling a wagon, and then spent the rest of the time in those underground mines going 1,500 feet underground every single day. My dad still remembers those caskets in the Catholic Church where they went, and you would never know which family member died last week. The whistle would blow, people would run to the mines to figure out if it was their husband or their dad that was dying. It was unions that changed that. It was unions that changed that. My grandpa and grandma saved money in a coffee can in the basement, and they sent my dad to a 2-year community college up in northern Minnesota. That's why I'm such a big believer in those 1- and 2-year degrees. My mom, and he became a newspaper man, by the way, and a member of the Newspaper Guild. My mom, she grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She moved to Minnesota because we had strong teachers' unions. At her visitation when she died, I had a picture up of her in one of the first strikes in Minneapolis for the teachers' union. And I stand before you today because of unions. I stand before you today as a granddaughter of a union iron ore miner, as a daughter of a union newspaperman, as a daughter of a union teacher, as the first woman elected to the United States Senate from the state of Minnesota, and a candidate for President of the United States. That is what unions are about. That is what unions are about, this idea that no matter where you come from or who you know, or if you don't even have a lot of money when you're running for office, that you can make it in this country. So a few years ago, my friend Sherrod Brown from Ohio introduced me to this woman. And she told me how she always, one time she saw those words, "restore the middle class," on a bumper sticker. And she thought, well, that's nice. And then her husband lost his job, and then she had to work multiple jobs. And finally, she started seeing those words as simply a prayer. So what I say to you, brothers and sisters of the Iowa AFL-CIO, is those words, restore the middle class, they shouldn't be a bumper sticker. They shouldn't be a prayer. We must, in 2020, make them a reality. And that starts with unions. Because when unions are strong, our whole economy is strong. You lift up the fortunes of all workers, and I want to thank you for that. So here's been my experience. When I became the county attorney for Minnesota's biggest county, I did 2 things. One is I looked and I saw that we were spending a lot of money sending legal work outside of our county to private lawyers. I took it back in because I knew we had great AFSCME workers that could do that work. We did it in-house, we saved taxpayers' money, and we got better results for the county. That's what unions are about. And then we had prevailing wage issues all over the state, and so I put a full-time lawyer on prevailing wage. And we didn't just get better results for workers in our state and for those contracts, those government contracts, we got better results all across the state. So here's some of my ideas as we go forward. Number 1, we should never hold our federal employees and the employees of federal contractors hostage for political gain. That is what this administration has done. They have held these federal workers hostage. We know that in the shutdown. And after Iowa Supreme Court's decision, we have to stand up for full collective bargaining rights for all public sector employees. We have to pass a law because of what the guys have been doing, what they've been doing across the country, to make it clear that no one can take away your right to negotiate for fair wages and fair working conditions. And when it comes to trade agreements and infrastructure discussions, the working people represented by the unions will have a strong voice and a seat at the table in my administration. Because economic strength and stability only comes when there is shared prosperity, when we have strong worker protections in place, and when, as my mentor, Senator Paul Wellstone, who we miss every day in Minnesota, said, we all do better when we all do better. So I am someone that tells the truth. I look people in the eye and I tell them the truth. They don't always like to hear it, but that's me. Right now, we have a guy in the White House that doesn't do that. He has made, at last count, 10,200-something broken promises. And that has started with the promises that he's made about this economy. You know, I figure because of your work and the work of some of our businesses and other people, he inherited a stable economy coming out of that downturn. So what does he do? He gloats about it, says how great it is, instead of meeting the challenges of our time. We need to meet the challenges of our time. So first of all, we have to look out for workers. I've made that point. We have to make sure there's true shared prosperity. That means bringing down the cost of prescription drugs for everyone in this country. He went on Fox News after he got elected and he said he would bring down the cost of pharmaceuticals so fast it would make your head spin. Well, it has made our head spin because for over 2,000 of them, they've gone up in multiple digits. He has made us promises on infrastructure, jobs for all of you, but he has never delivered that big infrastructure project. Look what it means in Iowa. It means investing in stormwater systems across the state. It means improving roads like the one to the airport. It means strengthening our Iowa levees. So instead of just talking about it, we have to act, because otherwise what he's given us is an economic plan when it comes to real people and real workers that, as they're saying they always say at the State Fair of Minnesota, where I'm going tomorrow, it's all foam and no beer, all right? That is what he has done. So that's what do we need to remedy this? Well, we need a real leader who's going to make promises and keep them. We need a president, and I will do this, who will strengthen the National Labor Relations Act. We must stop the attack on unions and roll back the right-to-work laws across this country. And we must make it easier, not harder, for workers to form unions. I will stand with you, and I want to make you think about this because you are the ambassadors to so many of those workers out there, some of whom voted for Donald Trump. First of all, he's putting in these judges, and you have to explain this to them, because I know you can, because you get it. You have to explain to them that he's put in judges that have given us decisions like the Janus decision. And I can tell you I will put in judges that understand the law, that respect the law, and will not make decisions to weaken our unions. This president has stood with his wealthy friends. Me, I will stand with you. This president has put his cronies in positions of power. I will bring decency back to our government. He is talking about everything every day that has nothing to do with these promises that he's made to our workers. While I'm talking about infrastructure and putting a plan out there with deadlines, what is he talking about? Buying Greenland and somehow pissing off the entire country of Denmark. That's not easy to do. As I said the other day, do you know the difference between Donald Trump and Greenland? Greenland is not for sale. We need someone. By the way, this is how you beat this guy, okay? You beat him by having an optimistic economic agenda for this country like you have, like we have. You do that. You beat him by standing up and protecting us and making sure that we're making our views clear, but sometimes you just ignore him. But you also beat him by showing how absurd the things he says and by being able to have the presence of mind to do it when it happens. When I announced in the middle of that snowstorm, he made fun of me and he gave me a nickname. He called me Snow Woman. So I wrote back, Mr. President, I'd like to see how your hair would fare in a blizzard. This guy has been governing with fear. He's afraid of unions. He's afraid of having people have equal opportunity at the table. He's afraid of science. He's afraid of equal rights. We are not afraid, right? You are not afraid in Iowa. We are not afraid in Minnesota. We know that we can go forward with optimism about our future, resting on the strength of our workers, and not go forward with fear, but with a fierce belief in the United States of America. That is how we win this. Thank you, AFL-CIO.
This is Sarah Guthrie, granddaughter of Woody Guthrie.
As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. Let's sing it together. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest This land was made for you and me. Oh, I've roamed and rambled, and I follow my footsteps through the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is mine. To the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land was made for you and me. There was a great high wall there that tried to stop me, and on the wall it said no trespassing, but on the other side it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. This is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Oh, nobody living could ever stop us as we go walking our freedom highway. Nobody living can make us turn back. 'Cause why?
This land was made for you and me.
Loud and clear. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to